In this episode, I'm going to talk about how Marvel Comics may have had a bigger impact on your childhood than you remember. So, stick around. Hello and welcome to Days of Dorker Past. My name is Rob, and in this week's episode I'm going to talk about how Marvel Comics played a big part in a lot of our childhoods, and in turn a lot of the nostalgia that we still hold on to. Now, Marvel Comics, as you know, well, nowadays as you know, is this huge powerhouse owned by Disney, but at one time they were an entity that was struggling to keep afloat. One of the things that they did to try to keep ahead of the wave, if you will, was they purchased an animation studio. They purchased, and let me get the name here right and look at my notes, purchased a studio called DePatie and Freeling Enterprises. This was a studio run by some of Warner Brothers' old animators. And they bought it in 1981. Now, I'm sure you remember this logo. This logo and some of the other ones appeared in a lot of our very popular cartoons, and in turn, with their partnership with Hasbro, into our toys. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When they purchased this animation studio from, like I said, some of the Warner Brothers animators, one of their first things, and I do not remember this at all, was to do a Pink Panther Valentine's special called Pink at First Sight. That led way to a cartoon movie, and these were made for TV, but a cartoon movie entitled The Grinch Grinches, The Cat in the Hat. But before that, Marvel Productions brought Spider-Man to TV. And before this, the Spider-Man cartoon was very stop-motion-y, akin to how South Park is made, or was made when it first started. It seemed like the comic panels were being animated, and it wasn't that great. But finally, this Spider-Man cartoon was fully animated and great. It soon gave way to Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which teamed Spider-Man up with Iceman and Firestar. And this was one of my favorite cartoons growing up. It didn't last that long, but it was a great cartoon, and it's great to look back at it because it was a lot of kids like me, our first exposure into the Marvel Universe. It was one of my first looks at the X-Men. At the same time that they were rolling out Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, they also did a Hawk cartoon that was great. Unfortunately, it ran heavily in syndication, and I was lucky enough to catch it on some Sunday mornings when I was staying at my grandparents' house, because their TV got a lot better reception than our TV at my house. So I was able to get more out-of-state stations or bigger cities that were too far to reach for our small antenna at my house. Incredible Hulk was a great cartoon, and again, was a great entranceway into the Marvel Universe, because he fought a lot of villains that weren't really his specific villains, but they threw him in the cartoon. I remember one episode vividly where the Hulk fought the Rhino. And, I mean, that's a Spider-Man villain, but it worked great against the Hulk. Now, the one thing that these shows also for me was my introduction to Stan Lee. And with his passing a few weeks ago, the thought of his narration of these cartoons has been playing very heavily in my mind, remembering them. I mean, what better person to usher you into these worlds? Because with his nice jovial attitude. He held you by the hand and was like, "Come on, true believer. Let's enjoy some Spider-Man. Let's enjoy some Incredible Hulk."
Welcome. This is Stan Lee of Marvel Comics warning you to look around you. Your classmates, your friends. You never know which one of them may be a mutant. A person born with strange and wondrous powers. Now, some mutants, like the X-Men, use their special gifts for good. But then there are the terrorist mutants who plan to destroy the human race.
For many years, I didn't know who that voice belonged to, but it sounded very kind and very welcoming. And that's one memory from my childhood that, I mean, I'll never forget. And like I said, with his passing that happened a few weeks ago, those memories have been playing very heavily in my mind. Also in 1982, Marvel Productions started branching out with more original cartoons. One of their first was one called Meatballs and Spaghetti, which were about a husband and wife rock band that traveled the country and solved mysteries a la Scooby-Doo. It was kind of the tried and true formula of a lot of shows at the time. But it did not last long, and it probably, I have no memory of it, and I'm sure a lot of people don't remember it. Another in the same year that they tried was a show called Pandemonium. And in this, it was 3 pandas that were given a cosmic power, and yet again they traveled with 2 human kids solving crimes, fighting some intergalactic villain that was out to get them. But one of the biggest cartoons that came out in 1982, yes, there's some of those annoying little tropes and characters that were very popular in the 70s and 80s, heck, even the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it deserves a watch. And if you can, please do. Great show, great memories, and Marvel had a hand in that. A lot of people bring up the fact that the D&D cartoon and how classic it is, but a lot of people forget that Marvel had a hand in that. Now, 1 year later, Marvel teamed up with Hasbro, and in a lot of different ways, they had a great partnership. But in 1983, G.I. Joe hit the airwaves. And with that, Marvel did the comic book and had a hand in the actual toys with the file cards that Larry Hama wrote. So they had this great partnership that launched this, trident attack on all of our sensibilities as kids, because we had a toy line, we had a cartoon, and we had a comic book. Each one had its own specific storyline, if you will, and each one of them endures to this day. It's a classic. It is one of the best toys, cartoons, comics that ever came out. And yet again, Marvel is there with that. And I know we talk about a lot of Marvel here at My Side of the Laundry Room, because they did leave a very strong impact on our childhoods on many different fronts. So I'm sure some of you are probably rolling your eyes of, oh no, another Marvel piece. Now, let's just think about this for a minute. With their team up with Hasbro, the next year they brought us Transformers, the cartoon. And with that, the characters in the toys and the comics. Another 3-pronged trident attack on our childhood sensibilities that still reverberate today. But that same year that they brought us Transformers, they brought another cartoon to Saturday mornings that maybe a lot of people don't know that they had their hand in, and that was Jim Henson's Muppet Babies. Now, the Muppet Babies were first introduced in the Muppets Take Manhattan, and they were a instant hit. I remember buying the Muppet magazine at the time that had Steve Martin with the Muppet Babies. I mean, they were cute, they were cuddly, they were what the franchise needed at the time. And the cartoon still lives on today on the Disney Disney Junior Network. Granted, it's a little bit different, but the things and the hallmarks that Marvel helped create through their help in 1984 are still seen today. And it's kind of a Disney full circle, because Disney bought Muppets and then Marvel, and now they are doing this. So it's like this weird full circle. Then in 1985, Marvel tried something different, and they did Super Saturday, or in some markets, the Super Sunday. And it was Jem and the Holograms, the Inhumanoids, Robotics, and Bigfoot and the Muscle Machines. Now, I remember each one of these shows vividly, but two of these shows rose to the top. And when the Super Saturday kind of drifted off, Jem and the Holograms and the Inhumanoids got shows of their own. Those shows went full bore in 1986, and at that time, they also did My Little Pony. Now, how many boys and girls out there remember how big My Little Pony was at the time? It's still big today for a whole different reason. But in the 80s, My Little Pony was revolutionary for girls' toys. And yet again, the cartoon, Marvel had a hand in that through their partnership with Hasbro. Now, right there, if you remember the My Little Pony cartoon, then you remember Marvel Productions. But My Little Pony, when it launched, was again a team-up, if you will. It was My Little Pony and Friends, and they had the Glow Friends. So if you remember Glowworm, right there, the Moon Dreamers that I kind of remember, but not so much, and one that I do remember, the Potato Head Kids. Also in 1986, Marvel did something, and they partnered with a whole nother fleet of comic book characters and brought us Defenders of the Earth. In this cartoon, you saw the likes of Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Mandrake the Mandrake the Magician team up and fight Ming the Merciless and his alien hordes. This was a great cartoon, and I think you can find it on Amazon Prime. But, yet again, Marvel had a hand in that. Now, in 1987, Marvel Productions teamed up with Jim Henson yet again and brought us the Fraggle Rock cartoon. This meant a lot to me because at that time I didn't have HBO, and that's when the puppet version of Fraggle Rock ran, and I never got to see it. I was very excited with everything I saw about it, so a Saturday morning cartoon, I was able to tune in, I was able to watch it, so that has a bigger imprint on me than the live action one did. Now, nowadays, I've seen both, and I love the live action one. It's a classic, but at the time, the cartoon, through Marvel and Jim Henson, that was, I love that show. Also in that year, they did a couple other little cutesy things that by name I remember, but I don't remember them actually watching them. Those were Little Wizards and the Little Clowns of Happy Town. Now, that's a name that, sticks out in my head. I think I've seen people talk about it, but I don't remember it much. In 1988, with their partnership with Hasbro gone, Marvel tried their own action hour, if you will. And this brought us the X-Men Pride of the X-Men episode pilot that only aired once. Fantastic, other than Wolverine being Australian, but was a fantastic cartoon, classic to this day. I watch it a ton now. It was great. But also what this action hour brought us was the really weird RoboCop cartoon and Dino Riders, which, great toys, pretty cool cartoon. But they kind of ended the 80s with, well, I don't know how to describe Rude Dog. was he a pop culture icon because of the t-shirts? But Rude Dog and the Dweebs was the last Marvel production that ran in the 80s. Now, they had a couple big shows in the 90s before they ended up being bought by, let me get the name right, New World Animation, which also had subsidiaries of Saban for the Power Rangers, Genesis Entertainment, which brought us the X-Men, and Marvel Films Animation, which did Spider-Man. And that all happened in '93. And like I said, from there, they kind of dissolved and were bought by New World Animation. Now, they had a couple of specials and theatrical films, and some of these ended up being pretty big. But their theatrical films, a lot of people say Transformers was their first. It was actually My Little Pony. They did My Little Pony, the movie. That same year, they did Transformers, the movie. And then the next year was G.I. Joe, the movie. And we kind of know how that all shook out after that. Now, I'm sorry I was brief on a lot of this, but it's a lot of history. And the point I wanted to talk about was how Marvel played a big part in a lot of our childhoods. I mean, from G.I. Joe and Transformers, of course, but to My Little Pony, the Glow Friends. I mean, these were popular toy lines at the time as well, and still have a big nostalgia in a lot of people nowadays. And of course, Gem and the Holograms, Muppet Babies, I mean, these were all big things. The Inhumanoids, unfortunately, the toys never really went anywhere, but the cartoon was creepy, weird, and cool. But anyway, that was just a quick rundown of how Marvel played a big part in a lot of our childhoods and a lot of our nostalgia and a lot of pop culture. So, until next time, my name's Rob. This has been Days of Dorker Past. Keep being rad, stay dorky. If you like what you saw, hit the subscribe. If you enjoyed it, give a thumbs up. And until next time, see ya! Thank you for watching this episode presented by My Side of the Laundry Room. Please check out some of these other recommended videos, and if you enjoyed what you've watched, please hit the subscribe button. You can also follow on Twitter, like on Facebook, and read up on My Side of the Laundry Room at our blog. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep being rad and stay dorky.